Hi, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of said week. I guess there's a more elegant way to say it, but I choose not to explore it. My name is Rich Stroffolino. I am the content manager at Gestalt IT, and I am joined each and every week by my good friend and coworker, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, how's your week been?
Week has been pretty good. I was traveling the last couple of weeks, so I understand that there was a replacement Tom. I'm very happy to see that they were able to run away fast enough for me to get my chair back.
Yes, they realized that those shoes could only be filled by a Hollingsworth. Not any Tom would do. So let's get it going with some of the news. We're going to really hit on Cisco Live a little bit now, but there's been some other news I thought was kind of interesting. That just broke yesterday, or maybe the day before that, was news out of Intel that they're looking to sell a majority stake in their AR business. I've been kind of mulling over the potentials of AR enterprise, kind of business use cases for AR. And so it was really surprising to see kind of Intel, I thought, making maybe an exit. But really, what's interesting about this is instead of, hey, our AR business is just soaking up so many resources, let's spin it out, get rid of that, and make ourselves the core of ourselves more profitable, as maybe Intel is the x86 business maybe slowing its growth, as it were. But no, instead, at least how Intel is supposedly spinning this, they're looking to actually bring on a partner that just has more expertise in the things that will take to make kind of a wearable AR a little bit more marketable. They're looking for people with sales channels, they're looking for people with design chops, looking for people maybe more on the UI side to buy into their business. They're valuing it right now at a $360 million business. This actually seems like a really smart move by Intel, Tom, and I'm kind of curious, do you think this will be a little bit more of a trend in the future? I'm reminded of Microsoft's band, their fitness band they came out with, and I feel like if they had, if they had maybe had a partner that had more of a sales channel into the wearable market, that would have been a little bit more successful, especially for Intel, not really a consumer company directly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The problem here is that Intel has all the brains and the horsepower to make this happen. What they don't have is the experience to build it right, because AR is going to be one of those things that's going to eat processing power for breakfast and lunch and maybe even a sensible dinner. But what's going to end up happening is that if you don't build it right, if you basically make Microsoft Band 3.0, nobody's going to buy it. And that's the problem with the wearable market originally, is everybody wanted to have their wearable on somebody's wrist. And it turns out making those things is actually kind of hard.
Yeah, the Verge actually just got a look at what Intel's been working on with their wearable. It's called Vaunt, and it basically looks like a slightly chunky pair of kind of chic hipster glasses. Doesn't look like the images that we've seen of the Magic Leap, which looks like a crazy pair of goggles that Superboy wore in the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sleek and streamlined, and it uses all custom Intel chips, like super. I mean, this isn't anything they've been putting out before. So yeah, it will be interesting to see if other maybe more hardware focused companies realize, like, hey, we're terrible. We're terrible at selling these to consumers. Let's partner up and maybe not potentially make as much money, but have something much more successful in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. And wearables are going to be huge. In fact, speaking about Cisco Live, Rowan mentioned on stage that Magic Leap, he had gone down to visit them, and he thought that was going to be something big in the future. I think that Google Glass kind of made people a little gun shy because of its lukewarm reception at best. But I think in the future, what you're going to see is as wearable technology kind of starts eclipsing the processing power that we have on our phones now, that it'll start becoming a more of a mainstay in people's lives. Because remember, it wasn't that long ago that having one of these things was a crazy idea, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just can't wait till I'm wearing a pair of glasses and I don't need to have any monitors, because anything I'm looking at is a monitor. That would be cool.
Right on.
Next, big news. We got some visibility into a little bit of some more cloud earnings. Amazon has for a while made AWS revenue and earnings and all that stuff publicly available. But Google recently disclosed in their most recent, or I'm sorry, Alphabet disclosed in their most recent earning calls, gave a little bit of visibility into revenue directly of G Suite and Google Cloud. And Microsoft gave some typically ambiguous numbers the way they roll into it. But basically, in the Q4 earnings, Amazon was pulling in $5.11 billion, 5.11, I guess, if you're saying numbers conventionally, in revenue for AWS. Of that, 1.35 billion was in operating income. So basically, the money that they actually made off of it. But on their earnings call, I think it was Sundar Pichai said that Google Cloud and G Suite combined, their weird, however they're defining cloud division, is at least a $1 billion business in revenue. So they're pulling in at least $1 billion in revenue per quarter. We can assume G Suite takes up, I'm going to say, probably the majority. I don't know. I don't know how much G Suite makes. It has to be a good sized chunk of that 1 billion though. So at most, I mean, I'm thinking that they're, a tenth to a fifth of what Google is pulling in per revenue. And then Microsoft, of course, says they made 5.3 billion in cloud, but that lumps in Azure and Office 365. Although revenue grew in Azure 98% on the year. So still seeing big growth. That tells me that number, though, is not that big. Tom, do any of these numbers surprise you?
No, it turns out that when you have to pay for your compute processing power by the hour, you end up making the company that you're paying rich. And it turns out that cloud has a lot of money. The problem is that you're talking about the three biggest cloud companies out there: Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. I don't really think that there's a lot of room down market for people to take money away from them, because they're the one-stop shop at this point.
Do you think there is, I don't want to say niche, but kind of like a service ad public cloud? I mean, Azure's kind of playing this game, right, where they have a whole bunch of media services and discovery services that are already built into a lot of their cloud offerings, kind of playing to more, I don't want to say pedestrian, but more like kind of business use case oriented versus IT specific use cases. But do you think there's any room in the public cloud market in that way? Maybe like just like very specific service oriented?
Yeah, I think what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to see these I'll create a cloud kind of things, where it's the cloud, but it's for healthcare, or it's the cloud, but it's for sensitive military data, or some kind of crazy thing like that. And those guys are going to get super traction, and no one will ever know about them, because unless you work in that industry, nobody cares.
Well, and then, the danger to that, though, is then Amazon just decides we want that and rolls out an update at reInvent, and all of a sudden, your business model is dead in the water, theoretically.
Yeah, Sherlocking is not dead, and Apple's not the only company that's doing it.
And finally, a last little bit of news before we hit Cisco Live. We had some news out of Microsoft that they are going to be killing Windows 10s, which they just released. We covered this on Gestalt IT when it first came out. If you're not familiar, Windows 10s is basically a lockdown version of Windows. Can only run stuff from the Windows App Store. Can't run obviously a lot of legacy app, anything that's not in the App Store. Was designed to run on a much more skinny basis, so you'd get better performance on lower end hardware. It'd be much safer, so you wouldn't have to install antivirus, again slowing down your system. And now they're killing that, and instead going to be offering S mode, which is a mode you turn on in any Windows 10 Home or Pro install. They're killing off the paid upgrades from Windows 10s to Windows 10 Home. Microsoft can't just I thought Windows 10 was supposed to be simple. They've found a way to make it complex. I don't understand it. But anyway, I was interested in Windows 10s. It seemed like a more friendly version of what they were trying to do with the original Surface RT, in terms of coming up with a form of Windows that doesn't carry such a huge legacy backend and can be a little leaner and meaner. And much like Windows RT, it seems like no one really wants that. We still want regular Windows when we want it, and no one's going to end up using this.
Right. Just like nobody wants to use iOS on a Mac, nobody really wants to use a crippled version of Windows on a big computer, especially with the Surface. I think that the reason for this, realistically speaking, they're trying to avoid cannibalizing sales of their existing product lines, and they're trying to merge code bases so that they don't have developers like, okay, those guys over there, they're the ones that specialize in working on the lockdown version. Now, what I want to be a fly on the wall for is the conversation when they start shipping this thing and people at home, grandmothers, start accidentally enabling S mode and calling into support going, I can't figure out how to get my kids' pictures. And that's going to be like a 4-hour support call.
It's going to be that legacy Spider Solitaire game that they've had on a CD for 30 years or for 20 years, and they just want to play that. That's the only reason they have a computer. That and Facebook. Yep. The one interesting thing to me is I thought Windows 10s was a decent job in trying to come out with low-cost Chromebook competitors that can play in that space of you can't break this, right? I mean, that's the beauty of a Chromebook, is like no matter what you do to that thing, you just flick a switch and you're back to vanilla Chrome, and you can just resync your profile and everything's back to it. I thought Windows 10s was trying to play in that space, and seemingly within a matter of months, I mean, literally that came out late summer, Windows 10s. They've already abandoned it. Maybe, if you're looking at this from an enterprise perspective, if you're looking at this from maybe like a fleet management thing, maybe you distribute all of your laptops with S mode turned on, and that kind of gets into the same space. But the fact that they don't have the confidence to make it its own dedicated SKU seems to me that this is going to be something that no one uses.
I agree.
All right, Tom. Cisco Live happened in Barcelona. I saw some pictures. It seemed like there was a lot of tiny coffee being drunk, a lot of meat hanging in windows, like shanks of animal legs. But then also some pretty interesting announcements in terms of Cisco. One of the big takeaways I was seeing from people is, again, kind of Cisco beating the drum that, hey, we don't just sell switches and boxes. We're a software business now. Are we living in the world of Cisco as a software business as of Cisco Live Barcelona?
Well, in between all the cortados and the jamon that we ate, we looked at if you look at the driving factors behind this, the words intent and context and the diagrams. Yeah, Cisco, Chuck is in the big middle of turning this ship, and it's doing one of those things with an aircraft carrier where it's about like this. It's pivoting in the water as fast as it can because Cisco understands that the hardware is about to become very, unimportant. Yeah, custom ASICs and kind of things like that may still have a use, but you've got to drive that intelligence on top of things. And that's really where they're going with all of the announcements that they've made is we have software that will let you do more with your network, whether it was, some of the DNA assurance stuff that they were talking about, whether it was some of the new platform announcements that they had around containers. Everything seems to be living in a software world now.
Can you dig into a little bit about their announced partnership with Google and trying to maybe form a little bit of a bulwark against dominance by AWS?
Yeah, it seems like what they really want to do is Google knows compute, but they don't know a lot of networking because their networks are fairly pretty basic when it comes to that. But they need Cisco to help power that on the back end. And so I think what they're doing is they're trying to line up a partnership, like you said, just to kind of either stand off against AWS in the places where they compete against each other, or maybe to kind of become the network-friendly cloud computing choice, because eventually you're going to hit a wall with AWS when you're trying to do crazy things like do an MPLS or some kind of hairy VPN tunnel stuff. And a lot of the solutions right now are just to drop an SD-WAN virtual appliance somewhere in and hope for the best.
One of the other things that really stuck out to me is they had some big updates with HyperFlex. They released version 3, all sorts of multi-cloud support and refinements on that platforms. I saw some people saying that this most recent update really made this competitive. I'm curious about what your takeaway from that was.
They needed to be competitive, and honestly, it was kind of because, at least for a little bit, HyperFlex was a punchline. It was, hey, how's that HyperFlex thing coming along? Giggle, giggle, giggle. Because Cisco kind of jumped into that market with both feet and forgot to look where they were about to land. And let's face it, they are not the 800-pound gorilla. John Chambers was notorious for saying, if you can't be number one in a market, buy number two. Well, in this case, they are creating number 3 or 4 because they are way far behind. Now, does it make it competitive? Yes. Are they going to make sales? Yeah, because there are people out there that would buy mustard from Cisco if it had the label on it. But they're going to have to make sure that they're positioning themselves properly against a company like a Nutanix, who basically own that market right now.
Well, and it's not that they've even been quiet on the acquisition front. To your point of buying number 2, they finished buying out SpringPath last year or early this year. They just bought Skyport, which has their own very unique play in kind of the HCI space. Do you see any other further acquisitions? And I don't even know if Skyport necessarily bleeds into what HyperFlex is trying to do. Do you see any acquisitions down the line for Cisco, or does HyperFlex 3, is it strong enough to stand on its own that they don't necessarily need to?
No, I think they're going to have to make a couple more acquisitions to make it robust enough, even to compete against the Dells of the world.
Wow.
It's just because it needs a little work. It needs a little refinement. I don't know who they're going to go buy, but they've got to do something because their in-house expertise right now is not really focused on servers.
Well, and much like the SD-WAN market, they're running out of people to buy. It seems like
Yeah.
the HCI space is tightening up just as much as SD-WAN.
Yeah.
Tom, what was your thought on their, Cisco's open source container platform that they kind of debuted at the show? I mean, are we going to start thinking of Cisco as this, container leader at this point? Is this catch up for them? Because containers are the new hotness, and they need to have something with containers in it. How does this fall in marketing buzz to actually useful?
I feel like this is complete catch up at this point because they're losing that space. I mean, you've got Docker, you've got a lot of people talking Kubernetes, you've got a lot of other things, and even inside of all the other presentations that were not cloud container platforms, you had a whole bunch of people talking about, well, we can containerize this, or you can do this, or you can do that. So right now, containers are eating the world, and this is Cisco's way of saying, well, we have a place for you to eat at the buffet table as well. I don't know how well it's going to take off. Again, going back to the HyperFlex thing, there are people that will buy this from Cisco. That's not a problem. But I could also give you a laundry list of companies for the next 5 minutes that had products that people bought that got killed because not enough people bought them.
Is there anything in this announcement that does anything to firm up kind of the dearth of really high end enterprise level networking support in the container landscape? I mean, that's kind of what Docker's been trying to do for the past year or two, is firm up both networking and storage. Is there anything in, or is this just like again just a, hey, if you need something to orchestrate some containers to organize this, here's Cisco's thing. There's no define.
I don't think they're innovating in this market. I think they're adding on to things they have already got. Hey, you can use UCS Director to build containers now, that kind of thing. This is not. They're not going to revolutionize container networking. The companies that have been trying to do that for a while haven't revolutionized container networking, and that's literally their job.
So, you mentioned it earlier that one of the big buzzwords around the show, and really around the networking industry in general, is intent. Was that? I mean, obviously that was the big theme of the show, or not. I don't want to say the big theme, but one of the words that you heard in every single session, seemingly, that Cisco was app aware, that Cisco is is intent driven. Were there any meaningful announcements around that, or was it just, we know this is a hot buzzword, we need to mention it a bunch?
Well, part of it is that a lot of the platforms that they released at Cisco Live US last year were ready for this, but they weren't ready to announce that they were integrating it with it. So this is kind of the, hey, remember how 1.0 was not that great? Well, here's 1.1, and it does have stuff in it that you want. Then they did a lot of talk around the being able to do the assurance stuff and to be able to kind of show you the evolution of their products to include this intent-based stuff. I love the idea of intent-based stuff from all the companies that we've seen so far. I love the idea of getting away from just hacking CLI code and actually understanding what applications do. Mainly not because I'm ready for the networking team to go away, but I'm ready for people to shine a spotlight on the app developers that have completely insane requests for things that we can't do. And then all the assurance people are turning around going, if your app ran right, the network wouldn't fail all the time.
Yeah, the one thing this isn't just a Cisco thing. This is for most players in the that people that are tacking on intent based to anything that they're putting out, is I don't hear, and maybe this is just because I've seen a number of Apstra Tech Field Day stuff, but the idea of documenting a single source of networking truth, I know that's kind of like their thing, but that lives outside the network, i.e., you can't just look at the network to find out what the network should look like. Has Cisco have any kind of response to that? I didn't hear anything about that from what I saw from the show.
No, they're building onto the same thing. They're creating these platforms. In fact, they kind of consolidated their messaging. There was a beautiful slide that talked about the ACI policy manager and the DNA controller and even the Meraki cloud controller. And it was the same diagram in 3 different colors with 3 different names attached to the pieces, all receiving intent, all allowing you to publish policy back to the network to make that intent happen. I think that this is, they're solidifying on this and trying to build out from this. The other thing, and I wrote a blog post about this last week, they're starting to push the ACI terminology down into the enterprise. because I think they're trying to unify everyone across the board to basically say, this is how things are going to be done in the future. You need to get used to this.
Okay. And so, Tom, I want one big thing, like surprise. Was there any one big surprise or big announcement that excited you from the show? And was there anything that you were looking for that you didn't, that you were a little disappointed that you didn't hear about?
I think maybe the biggest surprise was the container stuff. Yeah, and I know that I kind of poo-pooed it just a minute ago, but the fact that Cisco recognizes that they need to get into that market was pretty big, and that they're making some big strides with it. So I'm hopeful. I feel like maybe, and I had a little bit of a conversation with a wireless guy on the side here before a session started. I feel like that Cisco is kind of taking a wait and see approach to some of the new wireless advances like 802.11ax. I feel like that they're trying to get their ducks in a row. And yeah, I understand that there are no client radios out there that can take advantage of it yet. But maybe just to kind of, hey, we're working on this. We've got some ideas. We'd love to hear what you have to think about it. Because what happens is that those companies that come out with one, even if it's pre-standard right now, they've got a first mover advantage.
All right, Tom, if people want to check out more of your impressions from Cisco Live and just more of your stuff in general, where can they find it?
Well, you can always find my blog at networkingnerd.net. That's where I write about some of the technology with a little bit of a snarky tone. If you want something a little bit more professional, make sure you go to gestaltit.com and search for Tom Hollingsworth. I have some great articles there. Got some more coming up this week once I bang them out on the keyboard.
All right. Yeah. And you can find more of my stuff there. That just about does it for the rundown. FYI. That's why I linked into Tom to plug his stuff. But you can check out more of my stuff at gestaltit.com or on Twitter at Mr. Anthropology, MR Anthropology. And just wanted to plug a series that we're running. I think it's really, really cool. We're doing a blog series, kind of a conversation. We call them a tech talk with a company called Liquid. If you're not familiar with the company, it's Liquid No You. We're doing a series talking about high performance computing, composable infrastructure, GPU compute kind of topics are all going to be floating around. The first post of that went up from Liquid, and we're going to be posting a response post to that in a little bit here. So you might want to check that out. Check out our Twitter feed for that at GestaltIT to check out that series, or follow the hashtag LiquidHPC, and you'll find all the posts for that there. So until next time we meet, this has been the Gestalt IT Rundown. I'm Rich Stroffolino, and I hope you have a super sparkly day. I need to press the button to stop. That's what you do.